As Nathan approached the door, a dangerous thought entered his mind. What if Chief Ibuka had already found her? His grip tightened on the doorknob, his pulse hammering in his ears. But when he finally swung it open, relief washed over him. It wasn't danger that greeted him. It was Cheek. Cheek stood there with a lopsided grin, a grocery bag in one hand and a steaming takeout container in the other. "You're alive," he drawled, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Figured you'd be dead in a ditch somewhere." Nathan smirked, shutting the door behind him. "Good to see you too." Cheek made himself comfortable, tossing the grocery bag onto the kitchen counter. "I brought food. Not that you deserve it. I saw your fridge last time. Looked like a war zone in there." Nathan chuckled, shaking his head. "You worry too much." "I cook for a living, Nathan. Your eating habits offend me." Cheek unwrapped the takeout container and waved the scent toward his nose. "That's why I brought you real food. If you don't eat it, I swear I'll throw it in your face." Nathan rolled his eyes but grabbed a fork anyway. "You're ridiculous." "And you're impossible," Cheek shot back. "Now where's your mystery house guest?" His sharp eyes scanned the room. Nathan stiffened. "She's upstairs." Cheek arched a brow. "So it's serious." Nathan didn't answer, just kept eating. Cheek watched him for a beat before shaking his head with a knowing grin. "Man, you're in trouble." Before Nathan could respond, soft footsteps echoed from the stairs. Isabelle appeared, wrapped in one of Nathan's oversized tees, the hem barely reaching mid-thigh. Her eyes flickered between the two men, then landed on Cheek with uncertainty. Cheek blinked, then a slow smirk spread across his face. "Well, well, I finally meet the woman who has Nathan acting like a lovesick fool." Isabelle hesitated, gripping the fabric of Nathan's shirt as if it could shield her. She always felt uneasy around new people, especially men who carried the same air of confidence as Nathan. Cheek's teasing grin faded as he caught the fear in her eyes. "Relax," he said gently. "I don't bite." She nodded but remained wary, shifting closer to Nathan. Instinctively, he rested a reassuring hand on her back. Cheek sighed. "Great. Now I feel like the villain." Nathan chuckled. "She's just still adjusting." Cheek exhaled dramatically. "Fine, I'll win her over with food." Nathan scoffed. "That's your answer to everything." "Because it works." Cheek grabbed another container from the bag. "Isabelle, you eat, right?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Good." He handed her the container. "Here, consider this a peace offering." She glanced at Nathan, who gave a small nod, then took the food. Chike leaned back, satisfied. "See? We're making progress." Nathan watched Isabelle, the way she curled up on the couch with his shirt practically swallowing her, the way she carefully picked at her food, sneaking glances at him as if for reassurance. Cheek noticed too. "She's got you wrapped around her little finger," he muttered, amused. Nathan didn't even deny it. He just reached for his phone, scrolling through his favorite girly fashion page on Facebook. Cheeky raised a brow. "What now?" "I need to get her some clothes," Nathan said. "She can't live in my shirts forever." Cheek snorted. "Could have asked me. I know a few good places." Nathan side-eyed him. "I don't trust your taste." Cheek placed a hand on his chest, feigning offense. "Rude." Nathan ignored him, clicking on a few options. Cheek watched him with growing amusement. "You do realize you just admitted you're whipped, right?" Nathan smirked. "Shut up!" But as he added the items to his cart, he knew. Cheeky was right. Nathan pushed open the door, juggling shopping bags in both hands. The trip had taken longer than expected, thanks to Cheek's relentless teasing and unsolicited fashion advice. But in the end, Nathan had chosen everything himself. Soft, comfortable clothes that would fit Isabelle perfectly. He stepped into the living room, expecting to see her curled up on the couch, probably buried in his blue shirt again. Instead, She was sitting on the floor with her back to him, legs folded beneath her. Something about the way she sat there, still, quiet, lost in her own world, made something in Nathan's chest tighten. He wasn't used to feeling things this deeply, and whatever this was, it unsettled him. But he forced it down, locked it away like he always did. Clearing his throat, he walked toward her, placing the bags down beside the couch. "I got you some things," he said casually. "You've been stuck in my blue shirt for too long." Isabelle turned, and for the first time that day she smiled, small, soft, but real. "I like your blue shirt," she teased, tugging at the fabric. Nathan huffed a chuckle, shaking his head. "I know. That's why I got you a few more options." She peeked into the bags, pulling out a soft, cream-colored hoodie and a pair of comfortable shorts. Her fingers ran over the fabric, her expression unreadable. "You picked these?" "Yeah," he admitted, watching her reaction. She bit her lip, then looked up at him. "You're full of surprises, Nathan." He shrugged, sitting on the couch and stretching his legs out. "You hungry?" She hesitated. Then, with a shy smile, she said, "Actually, I made something." Nathan arched a brow. "You cooked?" She nodded, standing up quickly. "Wait here." Nathan watched as she disappeared into the kitchen. A few minutes later, she returned, carefully carrying a plate. The moment she placed it in front of him, he stared at it, his expression unreadable. It was something. Pasta, maybe, or an attempt at it. The sauce looked slightly too thick, the noodles uneven. Some parts seemed overcooked, others underdone. And there was a suspicious amount of cheese melted on top, forming a gooey mess. He glanced up at Isabelle, who was fidgeting with the hem of her shirt, watching him like a nervous student awaiting a grade. He smirked, picking up a fork. "Did Cheeky see this?" She groaned, covering her face. "Number and he won't." Nathan chuckled, twirling a forkful of pasta. He took a bite. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't great either, but there was something endearing about the fact that she had tried. He swallowed and looked at her. "Not bad." Her eyes lit up. "Really?" Nathan tilted his head, debating. Then he smirked. "For a first attempt, let's call it edible." She gasped, smacking his arm. "Nathan!" He laughed, dodging another weak slap. "What? You want me to lie?" "I tried my best," she pouted, folding her arms. Nathan wiped his mouth with a napkin, then leaned in slightly, his voice softer now. "And I appreciate it." She blinked, caught off guard by his tone. Nathan leaned back, stretching lazily. "Next time I'll teach you a few things." Isabelle narrowed her eyes. "Oh, so now you're a chef?" "No, but I know how not to burn water." She scoffed, shaking her head. "You're impossible." Nathan just grinned, watching her. For the first time in a long time, his house didn't feel so empty. The house was quiet, the air thick with the weight of unspoken thoughts. Nathan sat on the edge of his bed, his elbows resting on his knees, his gaze fixed on the framed photograph in his hands. His father, a man of strength, but also a man destroyed by the wrong woman. The flickering light from the bedside lamp cast deep shadows across his face, emphasizing the tension in his jaw. He wasn't sleeping. He rarely did these days. A soft creak pulled him from his thoughts. He didn't turn around immediately. He already knew who it was. Isabelle. She was always quiet when she moved, hesitant, unsure. He could feel her standing in the doorway, her presence delicate yet undeniable. "Nathan?" Her voice was soft, almost afraid to break the silence. He exhaled deeply, setting the picture frame down on the nightstand. "Couldn't sleep?" She hesitated before stepping inside, the fabric of his oversized shirt brushing against her bare legs. "No," she admitted, rubbing her arm. He finally turned to look at her. She wasn't standing close. She never did, as if afraid of taking up too much space. But there was something about the way she looked at him, the way she always seemed to be searching for something in his eyes. He patted the space beside him. "Come here." She hesitated, but after a beat, she moved closer, sitting on the edge of the bed, knees drawn up slightly. Nathan leaned back against the headboard, rubbing a hand down his face. "What were you looking at?" she asked, nodding toward the picture. Nathan exhaled. "My father." She tilted her head, curious. "What was he like?" Nathan's jaw clenched for a moment before he answered. "He was a good man. Too good. He married the wrong woman, and it ruined him." Isabelle frowned. "Your mother?" Nathan let out a humorless chuckle. "Yeah. She loved his wealth, not him. Used him, drained him. By the time he realized what she really was, it was too late." He ran a hand through his hair, his voice quieter now. "She destroyed everything, and we suffered for it." Isabelle was silent for a long moment before she whispered, "And now, you think you've done the same?" Nathan's lips pressed into a thin line. She wasn't wrong. He had married a woman just like his mother, a woman who saw him as nothing more than a means to an end. His voice was rough when he spoke. "Yeah." Isabelle shifted beside him, curling her fingers around the hem of his shirt. "My father," she started hesitantly, as if the words were heavy on her tongue. "He never really saw me. To him, I was just another piece to move around, a deal to be made. I was supposed to marry Chief Ibuka, a man old enough to be my father." Nathan's grip on the sheets tightened. He knew this already, but hearing her say it, hearing the quiet pain in her voice, it did something to him. "I didn't have a choice," she continued. "I was a child to them, a thing, not a person. They never asked what I wanted. It was always about what I could give, who I could benefit." She swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to be seen." Nathan turned his head slowly, his gaze locking onto hers. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. She looked at him then, not just at him, but into him, as if she could see the parts of himself he tried so hard to keep hidden. His voice was quiet but firm. "I see you." Her breath caught. Something in his mind told him to bring her closer, to pull her against him, to kiss her. His fingers twitched. He could do it. She was right here. But he didn't. Because as much as he wanted her, as much as he felt this strange, unfamiliar ache whenever she was near, he wouldn't take advantage of her vulnerability. So instead, he reached out carefully, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She leaned into his touch. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them had to. For tonight, sitting in the quiet, knowing they were not alone in their pain, was enough. The moment between them. Isabelle exhaled softly, her lashes fluttering as she turned fully toward him. She was still hesitant, but there was something else in her eyes now, something deeper, something raw. "Nathan." Her voice was barely a whisper, but it held a weight he couldn't ignore. She wanted more. She wasn't just looking for comfort anymore. She wasn't just seeking safety. She was asking for something Nathan wasn't sure he had the right to give her. Her small hand reached for his, fingers trembling slightly as she laced them together. He felt the warmth of her skin, delicate and soft against his rough palm. "You know you can," she murmured, her gaze flickering between his lips and his eyes. Nathan's pulse thundered. He could. He could lean in. He could claim her the way his body demanded. He could silence all the doubts in his head with a single kiss. But would that be fair to her? She was fragile. She had spent her life being controlled, being told what to do, where to go, who to love. Would he be any different if he gave in now? His jaw tightened. "Isabelle," he said, his voice low and strained. He reached up, cupping her face carefully, his thumb brushing against her cheek. You don't know what you're asking for. Her lips parted, her breath uneven. I do, she insisted, her fingers gripping his. For the first time in my life, I know exactly what I want. Nathan groaned softly, closing his eyes for a moment. He wanted her, too. That was undeniable. But the way she looked at him, like he was something more than a man weighed down by his past, by his failures, it made him feel like he didn't deserve her. I'm not a good man, Isabelle, he murmured, his forehead resting against hers. She shook her head. You're not perfect, Nathan. But you're mine. His breath hitched. Her. His? The thought shouldn't have sent a rush of possessiveness through his veins, but it did. She pulled back slightly, searching his face, desperate for something. For him. Tell me this isn't real, she whispered, her voice breaking. He couldn't. Because it was. Instead of answering, he reached for her, gripping the back of her neck gently, his thumb skimming the sensitive skin just below her ear. Her breath hitched. A battle waged inside him. He could take her now, let this tension unravel in the way they both wanted, the way they both needed. But she deserved more than a moment of weakness. She deserved promises. So instead, he whispered, I'm not going anywhere. Her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite name. Relief? Hope? Love? She swallowed, her fingers tightening in his shirt. Promise me. His throat tightened. I promise. She exhaled shakily, her lips dangerously close to his. And what if I want more? Nathan brushed his nose against hers, teasing, but not quite crossing that line. Then I'll give it to you, when you're ready. Her body trembled against his. I am ready. He smirked, his grip tightening on her waist. Not yet, he murmured, brushing his lips against her forehead instead of where she really wanted them. She made a small, frustrated sound, and he chuckled. One day, but not tonight. Because tonight wasn't about taking. It was about a promise. But in that moment, neither of them needed words. They understood what they were building together, a bond that neither time nor circumstance could break. And for the first time in their lives, they both felt seen, truly seen by someone who valued them just as they were. Isabelle's fingers curled against Nathan's chest, her breathing uneven as she rested her forehead against his. His hand remained firm on her waist, grounding her, steadying himself. The tension between them was thick, unspoken, yet undeniable. She was the first to break the silence. Do you think we'll ever be free? She whispered. Nathan exhaled, his thumb tracing slow circles on her hip. I don't know, he admitted. But if we aren't, we'll face it together. She pulled back just enough to look at him, her eyes searching his face. There was something soft, something vulnerable in the way she stared at him, as if he was the only safe place she had ever known. He shouldn't be, but he was. Nathan lifted a hand, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. You should rest, he murmured, though even he didn't believe the words. Isabelle bit her lip. I don't want to be alone. His jaw clenched. You're not. She hesitated, and then with all the courage she could muster, she whispered, Then stay with me. Nathan stilled. His mind was telling him to step back, to draw a line before they crossed something irreversible. But his heart was telling him to pull her in, to give her what she needed, what they needed. Slowly, carefully, he shifted back against the pillows, pulling her with him. She followed without hesitation, curling into his side, her fingers gripping his shirt as if afraid he might change his mind. He wouldn't. Not tonight. Nathan exhaled deeply, his chin resting lightly on the top of her head. He could feel the way her breathing slowed, her body melting into his warmth. And in that quiet, intimate moment, he realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about protection anymore. This wasn't just about keeping her safe from Chief Ibuka. This was about her. About them. Nathan closed his eyes, his grip on her tightening slightly. No matter what happened next, he wasn't letting go. The golden rays of morning filtered through the sheer curtains, casting a soft glow over the room. Isabelle sat on the windowsill, hugging her knees to her chest, staring out into the quiet estate. Her heart still pounded from the events of the previous night, from the weight of Nathan's words, from the promise he had made. She wanted to believe she was safe, but how could she be when Chief Ibuka was out there, hunting her like a prized possession? The creak of the door made her turn. Nathan stood in the doorway, his presence commanding yet calm. He had changed into a fitted black tee and joggers, his hair slightly tousled from sleep. But his sharp eyes took her in immediately, the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers gripped the fabric of his shirt. You didn't sleep. It wasn't a question. Isabelle sighed, rubbing her arms. How could I? Nathan walked toward her, stopping just short of touching her. You're safe here. For now, she murmured. His jaw tightened. He hated the uncertainty in her voice. He had given her his word, but trust was something she had never been allowed to give freely. He leaned against the wall beside her. He won't find you. She let out a humorless laugh. You don't know Chief Ibuka. He doesn't lose. He will turn this entire city upside down for me. Nathan's eyes darkened. Then let him try. She turned to him fully now, frustration flickering in her gaze. You don't understand, Nathan. He's put a bounty on me. Nathan stiffened. He's offering money, not just any money, but a life-changing amount for anyone who sees me. Her voice trembled slightly. There are flyers with my picture, bills with the reward. The whole city will be looking for me soon. Nathan inhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. That bastard. Of course, Chief Ibuka wouldn't just let her go. He wouldn't take the humiliation lightly. So what? Nathan said, his voice dangerously calm. Let them look. They won't find you here. She searched his face, as if trying to find something solid in all this chaos. Why are you doing this for me? Nathan met her gaze, unwavering. Because I know what it's like to be trapped. Isabelle's breath caught. The room fell silent. And then there was that moment, the one where she had leaned in, where her lips had been just a breath away from his. He had wanted to. Every instinct had screamed at him to close the distance, to take, to claim. But he hadn't. Because despite everything, she was still vulnerable. And Nathan was many things, but he wasn't the kind of man who took advantage of weakness. A soft shuffle caught his attention. He turned just as Isabelle stepped into the kitchen, wearing another one of his oversized tees, his green one. He huffed out a quiet chuckle. You're making a habit of stealing my shirts. She stopped mid-step, blinking at him. Then slowly, a small, sleepy smile tugged at her lips. They're comfortable. Nathan shook his head but didn't argue. Instead, he reached beside her and slid a cup toward her. Drink. She hesitated before taking it, fingers wrapping around the warmth. They stood there in silence, sipping their coffee. Nathan could feel her watching him, but he didn't push for words. He wasn't the kind of man who needed forced conversations. If she wanted to talk, she would. And if she didn't, that was fine too. For now, keeping her safe was the only thing that mattered. Across the city, Chief Ibuka paced his study, the veins in his temple pulsing with barely controlled rage. His estate was silent, but inside, a storm brewed. Isabelle was gone. Gone. And worse, she had humiliated him. The whispers had already started in his circles, how the great Chief Ibuka had been left standing at the altar by a mere girl. Unacceptable. He slammed a fist against his desk, rattling the crystal decanter beside him. His men had failed him. The search was dragging, and still, no sign of her. A stack of flyers lay on the table before him, her face printed in bold, the reward beside it promising a fortune to anyone who had information. It should have worked by now. Everyone had a price. His jaw clenched as his second-in-command, Enkay, stepped forward cautiously. Chief, we've checked all major exits, airports, and even sent men to nearby towns. No one has seen her. Ibuka exhaled sharply through his nose, his patience hanging by a thread. Then you're not looking hard enough. Enkay shifted. We have informants in place. Someone will talk soon. Ibuka's lip curled. Soon is not good enough. He turned sharply, grabbing a stack of bills and slamming them onto the table. The crisp scent of cash filled the room. Double it. Enkay's eyes widened slightly. Triple it, if you have to, Ibuka growled. I don't care what it takes, someone knows where she is. His voice dropped to something more dangerous. And when they do, she will regret ever trying to run from me. To be continued,